You gotta look calm. Answer their questions, but don't tell them nothing extra. Keep your hands out your pockets. You drop something, leave that shit where it's at. You gonna see me with my hands like this on the dashboard.
I was 9 years old when I first got the top. Khalil, put your hands on the dash where you can see them. Khalil, put your hands on the dash. I'm not playing.
I swear, we ain't done nothing. We drove like 50 feet.
Please.
Where is it? Where's the weapon? Hey, the gun. Where is it?
What gun?
Where?
Today's name is Khalil Harris, another unarmed young black man. Violence, brutality. It's the same story, just a different name. Come on, look at me. Look at me, come on.
You can't even see that you're acting racist, huh? I'm not. It's all our and us and Black Lives Matter, girl, until you clutch your purse when you're in the elevator with the black person. You don't need to use the N-word and use a fire hose on black people to be racist.
We're black, white. Nobody gives a shit. We're all the same.
But we're not. Y'all want to act black, but you get to keep your white privilege.
Go back inside.
You didn't do anything.
Go inside.
Put that down now.
I have a right to record this.
Point 7 of a 10-point program. Say it.
We want an immediate end to police brutality.
Finish it.
And the murder of black people and people of color and oppressed people.
By what means?
By any means necessary.
By what means?
By any means necessary.
By what means?
By any means necessary.
So why you gonna be quiet?
I see people for who they are, the exact same way I see you.
If you don't see my blackness, you don't see me.
Division is how they win. Unity is how they crumble. Hey, is it true? Cop go free, no trial, nothing. We're all witnesses to this injustice. We did all, and we will not stop until the world sees it too. This ain't about how Camille died. It's about how he lived. Khalil lived. His life mattered.
I'm on duty alone.
What if you were in a white neighborhood and it was a white man wearing a suit, driving a Mercedes? So if you saw him reach into the window and you thought that you saw a gun, would you shoot him? Or would you say, put your hands up?
I say, put your hands up.
Do you hear what you just said?
We live in a complicated world, Star.
No, it doesn't seem that complicated to me. No matter what we say, no matter how loud it shouts, they refuse to hear us. How many of us have to die before y'all get it? No more.
Right, so this was a little snippet from the movie as a little kind of background to The Hate U Give. Kevin, would you like to take it away?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third conversation on and about race. If you don't know who I am Judge Kevin Washington. I am the chairman of the Town of Windsor Human Relations Commission. I also have there are 9 other commissioners that serve on the Town of Windsor Human Relations Commission. If you are on, would you just please raise your hand or wave at the audience? They are Joyce Armstrong, Byron Bob, Max Kuziak, Patricia Mack, Desiree Primus, Leonard Swade, myself, Joshua Amaro, and Rebecca Jacobson. We feel that these conversations are vital in this point in time, as they've been before, they are currently, and in the future. And we thought, what better way than to start having conversations about race? There are multiple conversations that will be happening. There is no finite time that this will end. It will start over. We will probably take a break in December to give everyone a chance to enjoy their holiday and for Christmas, or Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, or one of them. But I will probably start fresh in January with a new series. I encourage you, if you want to deal with a topic specifically that you'd like for us to look into and find professionals that can facilitate it, such as Cassie and panelists such as my 2 special guests, please let us know. I will give you the email that you can email us, or the phone number that you can call us on. And you can contact us and let us know your thoughts about this program, prior programs, upcoming programs you're interested in and would like to see. Because these conversations involve all of us, and they're for you and for me. So we'll learn from each other and have good, calm discussions. I'd like to thank some of my partners in this event that helped spread the word. They are First Church with the senior pastor Nicole Grant Youngman and Peter, I can never say his name, I'll just say Pastor Peter so I won't mess it up. Grace Church with Father Chip Elliott, Archer Memorial with Pastor William Campbell, and First Lady and Reverend Francis Campbell. I'd like to thank all of them for their work that they're doing in this regard as well. Now, moving on to our special guest. First, I'd like to recognize Miss Tamala Avant. She is a diversity specialist. Tamala, are you on?
Good evening. Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Judge.
All right. Thank you for joining us. She is, are you a professor at Bay Path?
I am an adjunct professor.
She is an adjunct professor at Bay Path, and she will be, she is one of our special panelists that would be talking to us about the film. I will allow her at this time to introduce herself, if she will.
Good evening. Thank you again, Judge, and thank you again for the opportunity and the invitation to speak with everyone tonight. My name is Camilla Vaughn, as the judge had made the introduction. I am a diversity and inclusion champion. I currently lead Color Magazine, which is a diversity and inclusion online publication based out of Boston. And it's been around for over a decade, and we highlight and advocate diversity, inclusion, champion diverse professionals, and empower our diverse communities. I have about 10 years background in television, working for a large broadcaster, managing some television stations. And I also am a chapter president of an organization called NAMIC, the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity and Communications. And the mission of that organization is to create a pipeline and advocate for diversity and inclusion in all areas of communications to really bring representatives of all racial groups into the communication space. And I am a mom with 2 happy and beautiful African-American young men. Both are students at the University of Rhode Island. I have a sophomore and a senior. Yay, a senior. And also my husband is a homicide detective with the city of Providence. He's been a law enforcement officer for over 25 years. So this conversation has been an ever evolving conversation in our household with our sons, especially during 2020 in this turbulent time. and has been a really interesting time to be married to someone who's in law enforcement. And so, you know, a lot of things from this movie hits from a lot of angles. So I'm thankful to be here, and pass it back to Judge for.
Thank you, Camilla. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I look forward to hearing from you in a few moments. Our next special guest is Miss Genevieve Cadon. She is also a professor at Bay Path. Genevieve, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Not at all. So my name is Genevieve Condon. I am the senior lead faculty of the psychology department at the American Women's College at Bay Path University. My primary background is in forensic psychology, but I'm very excited and thankful to be here today to provide a little bit of psychology to the film. As well. I am also a published fiction writer. I've written about 15 novels with my publisher out of Australia, a lot of that deal with racial issues as well. I find it is a very excellent platform in which to share that information. Like Kamala as well, I am a mother. I have a almost 14-year-old daughter who is of mixed race, like myself. And I just gave birth to a little boy in June, who was almost 6 months old. So this has been, I was very thankful to be invited to this conversation because there is definitely something about having a son during these, during these times that make this conversation extremely more poignant to me. So I'm very, very much looking forward to having an engaging conversation with you all and providing some insight.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. We look forward to hearing from you in a little bit as well. Thank you so much. Our other special guest is also a Bay Path adjunct professor, and she's a special contributor. And she is also a Windsor bridge builder. And she helped get these wonderful two young ladies to do this program, and I am so grateful to her. She is Maria Furlo Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez, would you mind giving us a blurb?
Sure. Yes, I am a Windsor baby, class of '89. Yay! Maroon and white. You know, my day job, I'm an HR adjunct faculty hiring manager at Bay Path University. I'm also during the night, I'm also the executive director and host of Windsor's Girl Sense talk show, which you can find on Win TV and or on my channel. I also serve as the vice president for the Windsor Junior Women's Club. And I also serve as the vice president for NAMIC, the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity in Communication with Camilla. So I'm very excited to be here on a personal level. You know, I have one of each as well. I have a son, a daughter. My husband worked as a CEO for a long while. He's been retired retired from that. It's been quite a few years, but the stories are still the same. I have personal experience as far as, you know, my son and, you know, his interactions, you know, all his life he wanted to be a state trooper. Literally from kindergarten all the way to, you know, he started college. Every Halloween, he was a state trooper. And so until, you know, he got his license and was stopped and was harassed. And so it tainted that dream of his to become a police officer, a state trooper. So that movie hit home to me as well, again, from different angles as well, because it saddens me that it, you know, because of what's been going on, that he has to change his entire career. But I look forward to hearing from you all. You know, I'm very excited. We have a great intimate group here. And so I think we should just go ahead and start.
Thank you, Maria, so much. And you all, audience, please recognize that face because you may see it again in the near future. And without further ado, our facilitator. She is so special, so awesome. And I go to the same church with her. And I'm so honored that she agreed to be our facilitator this evening. She is such an impressive and dynamic woman, as the other ladies on the panel are. And without further ado, I'd like to say thank you. And I'm so grateful for you, Miss Cassie Copeland. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yes, for sure. So thank you so much for asking me to be the facilitator here. My name is Cassie Copeland. People in Windsor call me Cassie. And I've lived here pretty much like my whole life. And I'm looking forward to kind of diving deeper into the conversations here. I'm currently a distance educational teacher at IMS in South Windsor. I teach 2nd grade. And a lot of the work that I do is around social justice education, meaning I'm more behind the scenes of curriculum development and implementation in an online and in-person format. So when I saw this movie and I read the book as well, which, by the way, phenomenal book if you get the chance to as well. It gives you a lot more insight. When I saw this, it hit me in a very different sense because I'm multiracial, so I've had a lot of experiences that I could relate to with the main character, but then there's also areas where it makes me relate to some of the other characters in the movie, because I have some other family who are also in law enforcement, and how this kind of adds complex layers, as our main character had said in the little movie snippet as well.
Well, thank you, Cassie. Before I turn this over to our facilitator, I would like to say a special thanks to Jim Burke, who is our town liaison, and also to Jose and Frank, who's helped set up the IT. I'm greatly appreciative, and to Marva Copeland and Charlie Copeland for giving me Cassie. Thank you so much. The show is yours. The show is yours, young lady. Run it well.
Oh, thank you. Great. So in order to have a safe space for our conversations today, we are going to establish what's called conversation guidelines. I'm really reminded of Pirates of the Caribbean, where they're like, we have the code book. And it's like, well, you got to follow the rules. Well, not just rules, but these are kind of the unspoken expectations that keep us safe in conversations. So this includes speaking from the I, meaning speaking from our own experiences, not saying he said, she said, they said, we said. It's more of like, well, this has been my experience, whether it's something that I went through, something that I've learned more about to the best of my knowledge. Because when you say those I statements, you're taking that ownership, right, for your own narrative. The next one is listening to understand one another. Right? So when we're in conversation, there's going to be a lot of different things that are said, whether it's a personal story or a personal experience or something that people are researching about, right? Because there are a lot of scholars in town of Windsor and Connecticut. So we want to really lean in and listen to one another, not just to respond, but to understand another perspective. I'll never forget the times where I always have to listen to understand my brother because he thinks so differently. And I'll just keep trying to like try to answer him the way I think he wants me to, instead of trying to understand what he's trying to tell me. So sometimes I got to sit with that quietness and say, I want to listen here, maybe not talk as much, but listen to what you are telling me. So the next one here that we have is leaning into discomfort and leaning into our own feelings. So when we talk about identity and race, so much comes up. Even just watching that clip, I was just like, just so much ran through my mind and ran through my heart. So I always try to lean into like the moments where I'm like, oh, that feels a little different. I want to explore and unpack that. It's kind of like when I unpacked my clothes from a long trip. I want to understand, well, how can I understand myself and those around me better by leaning into these feelings? The next one's confidentiality, meaning it's kind of the same as the Vegas rule. What happens here stays here, but we take the lessons and we learn from them, and then that's what we get to leave with. So if someone shares a story, we would thank them for sharing their story, but then we take that lesson, that main idea, and then we run with it. That's what we take out back into our communities, into our homes, and into our lives. And the last one here is being respectful. Now online, it looks a little different because we are in the virtual reality here. So online, it means staying muted until you are called upon. So you can raise your hand like your actual hands. The best part is we got two to choose from, but you also got a digital hand. So if you click on the name of, you'll see there's a participants tab below. And then if you click on your name, you'll be able to raise your hand. And so when it comes to our times where you get to share and talk with our panelists in our open discussion, you'll be able to raise your hand and then we'll call on you right away. So those are our conversation guidelines. And this is something that we can always go back to if needed throughout our time together. And our brief agenda today is I'm gonna share my screen in just a second. We're going to go through a brief summary of the film. I know we just watched a snippet, but for those of you who aren't as familiar with either the movie or the book, I just want to go through a couple more details. Then I'm going to just hand it over to our facilitators, or not facilitators, our panelists, and they're going to give us their perspectives from their areas of expertise. Then we're going to have an open discussion on the movie. So it's going to be a dialogue between our panelists and everyone here who would like to speak. And then we're going to talk about ways we can take action in our own lives, in our communities, in maybe our workplaces. There are a lot of different ways that we can take action. And then I'll hand it back to Kevin at the end for our closing. So that is our list of things that we will be doing today. And I'm going to share my screen so that way we can get going on our summary. Okay. All right, so you'll see there's quite a bit of words here on the screen, all right? And I'm just gonna briefly highlight a couple of things. So you don't have to read this all unless you really want to. So this is a quick recap of the movie so that when our panelists are talking about specific scenes or some of the context, you will have a little more background as to what they're saying. All right, so this film really centers 16-year-old Star Carter, and she attends a party in Garden Heights with one of her friends, and they start to connect with some of their friends. And she is also the main character who goes to a predominantly white private school. So a large first portion of the film goes through how she code switches, meaning she kind of switches between what it means to be a young Black woman, but then also someone who has to fit into what's traditionally known as a white space, or in this case, the private school. So in the first parts of the beginning movie, we get to see some of these environments that she is in, right? So this first one is at the party, they reconnect, and then there are shots that ring out, and they run from the party together, her friend Khalil, and then her friend offers a ride home. So this is the kind of setup before we saw the scene that we did with the movie snippet. Then this is actually the scene that we watched. So while in the car, they're pulled over, and then she had to put her hands on the dashboard, and then she was trying to convince him, saying like, "Hey, you need to follow us. You don't understand. Like, this is like our lives are at risk." And he's like, "Oh no, but I'm an American citizen. Like, that's fine. We're going to figure this out." And he had a hairbrush in his right hand. And as soon as the cop told him to get out, because the cop assumed that the hairbrush was a gun, the cop proceeded to shoot him, saying like, "Where's your weapon?" And then he's like, "I got a hairbrush." And then he noticed it's a hairbrush, and the cop is like, "What? Nope, don't believe that." So it's a very tricky situation because our main character, Star, her uncle is also a cop. And you'll notice here he is a man of color, or a presumed man of color, because you can't ever assume just based by looking. You always have to have those conversations and talk about that. So what happens here is that she is a bit traumatized because she just watched her friend get shot. And so what happens next is they arrive to the police station, and they start to unpack what kind of happened with the shooting, and why certain people are going on trial. And the whole thing is kind of a blur at this moment to Star. In the book, the author really goes into detail around kind of more of the emotions that Star is going through and how she's trying to grapple with everything from her school life to being in her community, and what this means and how this has radically changed her life. Then later on, Khalil, her friend who was sadly murdered, his name appears on the Noon along with the title of Suspected Drug Dealer. At that time, Star is also a basketball player. So she starts to get a lot of flack basically from her classmates, asking questions, be like, oh, did you know him? You have the details. And so now she's starting to have to face microaggressions, meaning, well, these, and we went through this a little bit in our part 2. Kevin Booker came here and talked about a bit more about microaggressions. So we're starting to see how people are saying some small things that are very, very powerful and impactful. And we got to see that a little bit in the movie snippet as well. So fast forward, so before Star has to testify before the jury, because they're still trying to collect evidence and find kind of what's going on and what's happening, and the story is not quite being told in the sense of like not just with the sense of justice, but it's not being told for what actually happened. So she starts to rally the people. She's starting to find her voice as an activist, saying, nope, like no more. We need to start to make change. And again, in the movie snippet, we got to see a little bit of that with her talking to her uncle, talking to some of her classmates, talking to some of her playmates on the court, right? So later on, in the worlds, Haley tells Star, Haley is her friend, the one who we saw in the video, that the cop did the world a favor by killing Khalil and ridding the world of another drug dealer. Now, again, this is our main character, Star, needing to face kind of a lot of different microaggressions from her so-called friends who might not quite understand. So the two get into a fight in school because she's tired of being tired of all of this, and her friend is not understanding. And then finally, towards the end, the grand jury decides not to indict the 115 and riots erupt, meaning the case is basically like, oh yeah, cop goes off, like case closed, have a good day, everyone. And people are upset because they're like, well, there was no justice at all for this. And so at the protest, Star and a bunch of her friends, they start to rally here. So against the wishes of some of her friends who may not quite understand the position that she's in, she rises up to power saying, no, like, this is like, I'm going to use my voice as a way to share his story and as a way to disrupt the status quo that is perpetuating this. So a lot more things have happened in the movie here, but towards the end, the Carter family, they wound up needing to move to a new house in a safer neighborhood because things were getting very unrestful. And the family goes to see kind of the remains of what happened. So after the protests, again, in some of the snippets, people were starting to physically attack them, not just verbally. And then she, by the end, starts to think about all the people killed by police brutality and promises to keep speaking up for racial justice. So she is starting to find ways to speak out against incidents like this so that they won't happen again. So again, this is a very brief, very condensed version. There's so much that they talk about in the movie and the book. I highly encourage you to watch and or read it. But at this time, that's kind of our brief recap. So before I turn it over to our panelists here, these are some of our kind of guiding questions that we're going to go over. So each of our panelists is just going to kind of start off of just initial thoughts and feelings as to what the hate you give make you feel. Like, how did that make you feel? Because I know there's just so much. So we're going to start there, and I'll stop my screen share so we can see each other. So if either one of you would like to go first, go ahead.
I will start, I guess. So initially when, of course, I started with reading the book, and which has a lot more detail. So I highly recommend, if you can, picking up a copy of that. But for me, the movie and the novel, obviously a lot of emotions. I really saw a lot of myself in Star. I am multiracial. I am Black and white. And a lot of her struggle, one of the concepts that I discuss in a lot of my psychology courses is identity and Blackness. How do you identify yourself? And as we can see within the movie, even in the short snippet that we watched, Star is clearly struggling as she's growing up in Garden Heights, but yet she's attending the Williamson Preparatory School. So she has almost, if you remember watching the movie, it's almost like she's two different people, right? At least that's how I felt when watching it. She changes her dialogue, she changes her dress when she's interacting in those two different locations. So certainly while you're thinking about these questions and you share your own thoughts, feel free to do that in the chat if you have additional questions or want additional insights from either of us or anyone else. Definitely think about Star and maybe her own internal conflict that she was having. Maybe you've experienced something yourself. I know I personally have, and sometimes I still do on a daily basis, as well as certainly, raising my children and things like that, and trying to be my most authentic self. That's what I always say all the time, trying to be authentic to who I am, which can be very challenging. Another thing I kind of want to mention, because I know Kamala's going to have excellent insight into the media and the film aspect of it. But there was a lot of, I felt, weaponizing of the stereotypes that were perpetuated of African Americans. And this is something that you could, I would hang all my degrees on it. You could turn on the news right now and you could go to Fox or you could go to CNN, and you're going to have the story of, let's even say, a flood that happened in Tennessee and in Boston, and the coverage is going to be drastically different. There's this very poignant photo that I show of a Caucasian family in a grocery store trying to get food during the flood. And it says, wonderful family trying to provide for their loved ones. And then there's an African-American family, and the dialogue underneath that is shared on the news is, looters stealing at the grocery store. So while what is happening is very much the same, they're trying to provide, the dialogue that is put behind that, we are weaponizing those stereotypes almost on a daily basis, and it happens right under our noses. And I'm hoping that's something that we can discuss. And I know, Kamala, you have excellent experience in that, in the film, and I don't know if even like commercials and things like that, I see it all the time, and it's something that is very unfortunate because we don't realize how we are using those stereotypes to justify violence and racism, and we're kind of carrying that on. And I have lots more insights, but I'm going to share them later on. So I'll let her jump in before I get carried away. But
Thank you, Genevieve.
yes.
I think from personally, I actually watched the film first, then read the book. And my personal perspective, I think a lot of things always takes me back as for being a mother and being a mom of two African-American young men now. And just, I think identifying with some of the scenes that are portrayed in the movie, again, having that talk with your children, especially your sons, when they start driving. The biggest fear is your children getting pulled over by the police. So I that really resonated with me. I thought that was powerful. And just the feelings and the emotions that a lot of these characters had, the mother, and also Star herself, who's, the leading heroine of this movie. And again, taking and now reflecting back to 2020 and that powerful and all that emotion that my sons had after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and how impactful that is for young people to have to grapple with those dynamics. So I think, this film highlights a lot of issues, a lot of social issues such as police brutality, gun violence, talking about, and Genevieve alluded to it, racist practices and attitudes, and the cycle of damage that's caused by racism. There's many people, well, I can say that, it's hard to have conversations sometimes with those who are not familiar or interacted with people of color. You know, a perfect example with Star in her school resonates with me. Both of my sons attended a private, predominantly white Catholic school, and hearing some of their stories again resonates with me. It's experience that Star dealt with, those stereotypes. Okay, Star was a basketball player. That relationship between people seeing Black people or Hispanics or people of color being good at sports. Both of my sons were excelled at football, so the thoughts were them being at that school was for sports, and so there's a lot of those biases and those stereotypes that you can see that are perpetuated directly in this movie. So I think those are some great things that we can talk about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both so much for sharing. At this time, if anyone else would like to share, just kind of what were some of those thoughts and feelings that you had after watching the film or reading the book? I'm going to just call on 2 participants to share in a minute or 2. So if anyone would like to share, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Yep, go ahead, Carol.
I only saw part of the movie. I registered late, unfortunately, but I did see probably a good 45 minutes into the movie. And it was very disturbing that a father should have to speak with his children in such a way that these are the rules if you want to live in a white man's, land, or it just, it was unnerving. I feel very uncomfortable in my comfort. I live in Tolland, which is a predominantly white town. There is not, I do have, I've had wonderful interactions with Black friends, and but I feel that I am, excuse me, I'm privileged, but that's not a good thing sometimes. And I'd like to educate myself more. I'm part of a committee at my church on justice and peace, and would like, as a committee, to learn more as well. Thank you. Thank you for this series.
Of course.
Can I just say I really loved your little snippet of saying you are uncomfortable in your comfort, because I think that is very honest of you. And these are the type of conversations that we need to have, educate ourselves. And my husband, he's white, and we just had a son together, and it's us sitting down and having a conversation about him asking questions like, how am I going to explain these things to my son when I've never experienced them? And that's certainly a challenge, right? Something to consider as well. How do we have conversations with friends and family and other individuals, maybe loved ones, potential partners, when we haven't had that experience? And it's conversations like these where we can maybe step out of our comfort zone a little bit in a safe place and have these types of dialogues. So thank you for joining, Carol, and being the first to speak on, watching your snippet of the film.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else want to briefly share any thoughts or feelings before we move on to kind of some more constructs that we saw?
I just want to also congratulate Carol. I actually wrote that phrase down. Being uncomfortable in my comfort. I was like, wow. And so like that really that was a first for me. And I also want to thank, first and foremost, I do want to thank everyone on this call, because it means so much, at least for an individual like myself, to see this audience before me that want to learn more about me. So it's very humbling, and I do welcome that. Having said that, when you look at my outer shell, it tells you one story, but I am Latina, right? So I was raised in what I like to say, in a 400% Hispanic family. I'm Latina because my mom is from Puerto Rico. My dad is not. He is American, but I didn't know that side of me ever until I was an adult. So I literally was raised in a Puerto Rican household between Puerto Rico here and the Bronx. So if it doesn't get any more New Yorican than that. I say that because I married an African American. And when my son did turn 12, 13, and he said, well, I have to sit down with my son and have the talk. I didn't know what that was. And you might think, and he would say, well, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he says, you don't know what the talk, I'm like, no. I mean, it's not something that necessarily in a Puerto Rican household is discussed, but it was hard for him to see me as a Black woman and not know what he's talking about. So when I was listening, so I sat down because I'm like, honestly, when he first said the talk, I'm like, I thought it was the birds and the bees. I didn't know what he was going to, I didn't know what he was going to, where this was leading to. And I was like, he's 13, honey. So anyway, but when we sat down and I started to listen to him, just as serious as the dad was in this movie, and just as stern as the dad was in this movie, he was 10 times fold that. So he scared me. And I said, this is horrible. I said, why are you scaring our son? This doesn't happen. This is coming from me. And so he was very baffled and confused. Like, how do you not know that this happens in the Black community? But you look like that, and so it was like the talk was also for me, and I really did take it in, and so even though I heard it, I let him finish, I let him do his dad thing, but I still walked away like, he scared the living lights out of my son. Like, I can't believe he said that, until he got his license, and until he was stopped for the very first time. And then that's when I went home and I was crying. I think I cried for a week. And I say, I get it now. I understand. So, don't always assume, when people look at people's shell, and even they may not even know what may occur in their same ethnicity, per se. I mean, be ignorant to that as well. So, and I also say that because I was just as stunned as you were, Carol. I was just as stunned when I heard the talk for the first time from my husband, with my son. And then ever since then, that to me was the like, okay, wait a minute, I really need to know more about what's going on here. And that's what put me on the diversity, equity, and inclusive journey that I have been ever since. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. Absolutely.
Yeah, wow, Maria and Carol. And it's funny as this conversation is just revolving only on that one subject of the talk. And I think Carol said it so eloquently that, she was uncomfortable hearing that. And I think that resonates for those of us who have to have it. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have with your children, especially, these conversations are happening younger and younger. And the way Maria shared that first experience with the talk is interesting because I'm the one who had the talk with my sons. There's, again, that interesting dynamic within our household. My husband brother is a retired state police corporal. I have nephews and who are on the state police, and other nephews who are on the Providence Police. So it's a law enforcement family. So my husband kind of has a different perspective seeing things in some of the conversations. So when my boys were getting ready to get the license and prepping them, I had the talk. I think I always had to kind of remind my sons that Rhode Island is a small state. We all know the littlest state in the union, right? You can drive from one side to the other in 45 minutes. It's a small state. I live in a small city. It's a small town. Everybody kind of knows everyone in Rhode Island. It's just that small. But I had to constantly remind my sons that, yes, you have family who's in law enforcement. Yes, your father is known well. He's been in, again, law enforcement for his entire career, but don't get comfortable in that. I said, you might be the few who can say, my father is a policeman. Be respectful. Is it possible I can call my father? I said, not many African-American men have that ability to do that, but don't get comfortable, because there's a lot of law enforcement will say, I don't care who your father is. And I constantly had to remind, especially my oldest son, again, he's very social like his father, and to don't let them have their guard down so much, and just be mindful that this still can be a situation that can turn badly for you if you don't follow the rules and do the right thing and say the right things. So I think that's one thing that I had to reinforce when I had the talk with my sons, is to, recognize that at that point you have no power when you're in that situation. And the most important thing is for you to come home safely, and whatever things we have to do to address after the fact, we will do that, but I need you to come home. So, and that means you following the rules. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. But again, Carol, thank you for pointing out how uncomfortable you were watching it, and just, really starting the dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I see, Judge, you have your hand up. Would you like to say something real quick? Go ahead.
I'll be real quick. I just want to say I too come from a mixed race family. I have Puerto Rican relatives, and it's interesting that I think unless Mr. Freeman, I am the only other man of color on the call, and it's interesting that I didn't have a talk. Neither of my parents talked to me about what to do when somebody stops me, and I like to think that's because we were a military family, and we traveled around the world and lived around the world, so we never really had a problem with it. As I've gotten older, just like Camilla indicated with the policeman in her family, I became a judge. So, but it makes no difference, because if you're stopped, you're stopped as a man of color. And until they run your license and your license plate, then I get, oh, Your Honor, I'm so sorry I stopped you. And that has happened here in Windsor. So I get off because of what my job is, and that's the strange thing that I found is it's not who I am and what I did or what I did not do. It's because of what my title is. And I thought that was interesting. I also would like to thank Ms. Carol for making that comment. I can understand that as well, and I appreciate that. The part of the film that really got to me was when Chris said, I don't see race. And then Star responded with, well, if you don't see race, you don't see me. And I get that, even on a professional level, and the colleagues that I work with every day, it's like, well, I don't see race. When we started this dialogue at my office, I don't see race. It's like, well, if you don't see race, then you don't see me, which is very true. but I just wanted to highlight that part. And the last thing I want to say is that the Puerto Rican side of my family, my cousins and stuff, they did have a conversation, because it also happens in brown communities.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the young man that was shot in, what is it, Middletown?
Yep.
You know, it happens in brown families as well. So they had my cousins had conversations, you know, and they're Latino. So it happens to all people of color. So that's all I want to say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. That really highlights how there's a lot of different moments throughout the film that are kind of like shockers, right? So I'm going to start with our panelists here, but what part was the most unbelievable and really stood out to you that you could share with our group here? Genevieve, would you like to start?
Sure. I think for me, the judge kind of just touched upon, I think, was what was the most unbelievable for me. And it's because I've experienced the same I guess, words being used, like, well, I don't see race, or, oh, I don't really see gender. And it's like, well, you kind of have to, right, in order to understand it. You can't pretend that it doesn't exist. You kind of have to be like, oh, this is something that we need to talk about and we need to discuss. And like the judge mentioned as well, there have been situations for myself that, you know, I'm younger, I'm of mixed race. I do have a certain look about me. I look a little bit more put together, but my hair is actually blue. I'm covered in tattoos. So when people see me initially, they do not think that I am a practically PhD educated forensic psychologist, right? I typically get how I look on the outside, and that is how I am judged. My daughter, I wish I could show you all a picture of her, but she is very, very pale skin, had red hair, and she has bright blue eyes. So you look at me and you look at her. And one of the challenges that I have actually faced with her as she continues to grow up is she is struggling to find her African-American identity because she doesn't look like it. So one of the stories I want to share about her is I remember her being about 6 years old. She too went to a private Christian school. The difference for her is she fit in, right, because of how she looked. And I remember one day I went to pick her up and I wanted to start volunteering, and her gym teacher was standing out waiting for me to come to give me all the information. And I walked up and my daughter Emma goes, "Oh, Mom." And the teacher looked at me and goes, "That's your mom?" with that face. And my daughter looked up at me with this petrified look, because she knows that it's very hard for me sometimes to reel those kind of emotions in. And I said, "Yes, I am her mother." And she said, "Wow, I would have never thought." So it's very challenging. And I have my son now, who is my complexion, looks a lot like me. And, you know, my daughter does, even though she's almost 14, she struggles with that, because she goes, "I just feel like he's going to have it so much easier to identify with who he is and his roots because he has a certain look about him." And it really had made me reflect and want to bring this up during this conversation, because sometimes it's not just those who look right, who have the darker skin complexion. My daughter looks Caucasian. And she struggles because she's like, I want to be able to embrace who I am, but she constantly feels like she has to validate. She's had friends say, you're not African-American. And she's like, I am. So that's certainly a struggle. And when the judge mentioned that particular scene, that is the most for me, because I sat there and my daughter sat there and we watched it together, and she goes, "Oh, I hate when people say that." And it's like, I feel you, girlfriend. So certainly if anyone has any insights on that, I'd love to hear it. But just so everyone knows, I did keep my cool during that situation, but can't promise I would do it again. But
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Just kind of a quick note on that. I really relate to what you're saying, because blackness really appears in many different forms. I know I too have experienced that growing up, even in Windsor, where it's just like a lot of my white friends and classmates were like, "But you're not white." And then a lot of my black classmates are like, "But you're not black." And then everyone's like, "Wait, so are you Rican?" And then I'm like, "No." So it's just kind of like, where do I fit in, and how can I understand these kind of cultural, like, what is the cultural norm of sorts? I know Mariah Carey talks about this in her audiobook, which phenomenal, by the way, if you get a chance to listen to it. She talks about the dichotomy, meaning that huge difference between what it means in white and black in America. And she talks about struggling and grappling with that too, and gives quite a few different suggestions. But that really ties into like kind of the movie here with kind of how do we understand race and why certain things are problematic with how we're saying and treating one another. So I just wanted to put that in there. But
yeah, I think that's great. I think, you know, from a perspective of the filmmaker, and I always, when I, you know, talk about media and film, especially films such as this, I always try to put out to those who I'm speaking with is, you know, what is the filmmaker trying to get across to the audience? You know, we already know the power of images is very powerful, and Casilla, you kind of alluded to that in the beginning, and so did Genevieve, about, you know, commercials and different things we're seeing in the news, and how that reinforces and perpetuates stereotypes that we all have stereotypes and biases. It's just normal. But I think too, it's important to understand the context of this film. Now, remember, this film was back in 2018. This is before, you know, the traumatic 2020 summer events, right? And before you really saw Black Lives Matter in the forefront in the media, even though Black Lives Matter started in 2013. So Black Lives Matter has been around for a while. And we all know this film embodies activism, social activism, how these young people, how they are affected by, especially Stars, is affected by this traumatic event, and her move to challenge the status quo. So, you know, when you think about 2018, like, what was the environment? What was going on to make, to, you know, encourage the person to write the book and to encourage this film to be made? So before the George Floyd and before Breonna Taylor, there were other events going on. We had Stephen Clark. He was 22-year-old African-American male, and where the police killed him in Sacramento, California, again, holding a phone that the police confused for a gun. And then in Louisiana, the state attorney announced no charges were going to be filed against the murder of Alton Sterling, who was shot selling CDs outside a store in Louisiana. So there's these undertones that kind of was in the mainstream media when this film came on the scene back in 2018. And again, like I said, recognizing Black Lives Matter was a movement, but really wasn't to the forefront of where it is today, even though it was known for those who are activists and those who are marching, those who are demonstrating. They were on the scene of a lot of these other events. So, you know, just always want to be mindful, like what is the environment, what is the tone when these films or these works are written or put out there to the mainstream, and that also causes these emotions from people who are viewing it and reading in context, right? You can apply it to your everyday situation or your own personal environment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. Like, as you were saying, there's a lot of very relevant and salient points today, even in 2020, especially with that notion that people are just now starting to get along with like Black Lives Matter, when it's kind of like, well, this has been here for a long time. I remember I was a senior in high school and that came out and I was just like, yes, like, let's go. But like, not everyone was on the same page. So that cultural and also where in history is that happening? That's also super relevant. But I'm gonna open up the floor to anyone else who'd kind of like to speak about some of the points, like some of the either unbelievable points or some that really stood out to you if you read the book or watched the movie. I'll call on two people to share with the group. Yep, go ahead, Ronald. Yeah.
What I found very interesting.
Ooh, there you go. Oh, there you go. You want to unmute yourself. You had a feedback loop there.
Unmute.
There you go.
All right. What I found interesting, and I haven't seen the whole film, I did see the shooting and everything, and I hear what's been said in terms of the story that Black men are told at a certain age. All right, but I think there are two stories: the story that the Black man hears, and the story that the police hear of what they're supposed to do. And these are really not aligned in any rational way, okay? And thus the boy puts up a hairbrush and the policeman sees a gun. Now one would assume, well, he should be wearing glasses. There's something wrong with his eyes. No, I think there was something wrong with the system. You know? And that's where part of the discussion has to be, to figure out, what are the police told? What's the story? Before they get in their car and drive out on the road, what do they carry with them? So I thought that was a tragic event of which the police officer, you could see he has to reinvent reality because he realizes what he's done. And he has to have a gun to make sure that he's going to be okay, really. But there is no gun. And he slowly is coming to that awareness. And you get the feeling he's starting to realize, what have I done? Okay. You know, and that's what I thought was part of the interesting thing there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. It's really interesting to see how in the film, even up to present day, that Black men are feared and Black women are forgotten. Whether it's within the news, within the literature, or how we talk or how we behave, it's just that's the sad narrative that we live in and need to challenge more. So thank you so much for sharing. If anyone else would like to share any kind of unbelievable moments or anything that really stood out to you from the movie or story, I'll call on one more person. I see, oh, it's Mackenzie. Go ahead, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. The movie a while ago, and I read the book first, actually. And what stuck out to me was the conversation she had with her friend, her white friend, where she couldn't see that she was racist. And I can't remember the exact line, but it was when her friend was kind of like, she kind of said something along the lines of, oh, but you're a nice one, or you're a good one. And she was, because her friend was, because Star was asking if she was intimidating or why it wasn't the same with her. And then along with their other friend, who was a person of color as well. And she explained that she also experienced racism from the same white friend. And it was just like, because like I go to a school, I don't go to Windsor High, I go to Metropolitan Learning Center in Bloomfield. And my school is majority people of color. And it's like, I have kids in my grade who act that same way, where it's like they're naive to their racism. And yeah, so that part stuck out to me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, there's a lot of different points, even like from a student perspective, to kind of see the smaller interactions that have such a huge impact on how we now think about one another and then ultimately treat one another. So thank you everyone who shared on those salient points. And so I know a lot of the film really goes into basically racism. And so why is this problematic? Because the film shows us many different examples from like different microaggressions or the way that we talk and treat one another. But at the end of the film, like our main character Star goes, like she is transformed by this experience. And so one of the takeaways is, well, racism here. So why is this problematic? So I'm gonna turn over to a couple of my panelists first. Go ahead.
This was another one of the points that I kind of made as far as from a psychological perspective, but you know, we often talk about the cycle of the nature of racialized poverty, right? So, you know, we see that a lot with Khalil when they're in the car together and he's mentioning, you know, the song, you know, Thug Life, right? And how, you know, Star's questioning, you know, why are you, you know, turning to becoming a drug dealer when that's the life that your mom lived? And you talk about how you didn't like that. But we really need to look at this concept of this perpetual cycle, right? And why is this a cycle that is continuing to recur. So we're looking at things like finances, right? Prosperity within certain predominantly Black communities. And this poverty almost feeds on itself. There aren't enough resources that are made available. From an educational perspective, the school systems are severely lacking. I grew up in Western Mass in Springfield, Massachusetts. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but I went to the worst high school in Springfield, Massachusetts, Commerce High School. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. Yep. And the reason I went to the school is because they had just implemented what was called the International Baccalaureate Program, the IB program, where you go and you obtain, you take these courses and you get college credit. So what they did was they put this IB program at the worst school to boost the numbers so the school could actually stay in business and still obtain some sort of funding. So I was placed in this school. I was on a totally separate floor than the rest of the school, and we were literally locked in every day. And we were not, guns were brought into school. The school was constant on lockdown, but me and my 12 little student peers were in this bubble, right? And then I didn't know anything. I was just like, woohoo, I'm going to graduate with, a whole year, a whole semester of college already done before I'm even 17 years old. But now that I reflect on it, and now that I'm older and I learn more about the way this systematic racism works, it occurred even back in 2015, 2000 to 2015 when I was in high school. And it's something that I guess now is the most concerning to me because it is very strategic in its choice. What I mean is there are literally people sitting behind a desk that say, I'm going to choose this for this reason, because it works, because we can kind of hide it and put a blanket over it and pretend that these issues don't exist. And that's just kind of one of the reasons why I certainly think that, racism is a problem in general. And, sometimes it comes down to numbers and it comes down to needs. And my daughter's father went to the same high school as me, and he was in just with the regular population. He talked about how there weren't enough seats, there weren't enough textbooks, but yet I was secluded in this little bubble and had no idea what was going on right below me. And just something to consider and ponder when we talk about racism in the movie and just how the system actually works. And I'm sorry if my video keeps going in and out, but my internet is kind of funky, so I'm saving some of it by hiding myself. But feel free to. I think this is a very important conversation to talk about that systematic racism as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, even in the movie and within our own lives, we see it manifest in so many different ways. So thanks so much for sharing that as an example.
Estella, I wanted to chime in, and
Sure.
I wanted to go back to something Mackenzie mentioned, that what stuck out with her, and that is exactly what stuck out with me with regards to Star's white friend, which they were really buddies in the beginning, and then as time went on, because of the subject matter and because of the events that were occurring, the relationship dwindled, and in the end you saw that they weren't even interacting at all.
Yeah.
And I want to transpose that into the reality. That's exactly what happened this year, with many of our friends on social media, with many of our people in our circle who at one time, we all held each other, I guess, on the same level of trust, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, all this happened, and then you can see, depending on the phrase that they would choose, or, how they would react to that, or maybe you see some of the posts that, and then you're baffled, you're taken aback, like, I had no idea that that's how this individual really, really felt. And, it was disheartening, and then you start wondering, well, geez, they really didn't know me, or gosh, I never really didn't know who they were as well. So just that, their relationship, you know, if that doesn't describe 2020, I don't know what doesn't. And it's taken, you know, at a permanent. It's not a temporary. It's not a fad. You know, it's a permanent situation now. Even household families have you know, separated because of this, because it is that, you know, granular, that big. And I also just very quick incident as well. When my daughter first started college, she graduated from Bay Path, but she didn't start at Bay Path. So at her first institution she attended, I call it the morning after. So it was when the president, the current president, the inauguration day. And the following morning after inauguration, you know, she was living on campus. And I remember getting in my car, you know, I live in Windsor. I remember getting in my car and I worked in Springfield. So I would drive to Springfield. And that morning, I think it was the longest drive in my entire life. It was just like, I didn't know how to feel that day. And I said, oh my gosh, like, how am I supposed to protect my kids? Is exactly what I was saying to my head on my drive to work. I get to work, I sit at my chair, I get my coffee. Just as I was going to take my first sip, my phone rings. And it was my daughter, and she's calling me hysterical from the closet in her dorm. And I said, what is the matter? And she says, just crying. And she's like, I don't understand what's happening. You know, she was, all I did was, you know, I woke up, you know, I saw the results. I was upset, but, you know, I was just gonna, you know, I just got dressed and I was gonna get breakfast, you know, like I'm gonna get breakfast and, you know, and start my school day. But initially when she opened up her dorm door, a male, it was co-ed, right? So a male student, a peer, came from one end and said, hey, there is a N-word. And she thought, you know, she thought to herself, did he just call me the N-word? You know, like she thought it was too early, you know? And so she proceeded to, you know, down the hall, and then she put her hand on the door that leads outside of the building. So as soon as she did that, there's some stairs, you know, that go down next to the door, and a female white peer that also lived in the building, and she yells out, oh my God, there's another N-word. So then she opens the door to head out, and she sees that on one side of the grass, there are peers, students that from the university holding the sign, the Trump sign, you know, and we're saying, go back to Africa. They were chanting this on the school property. And on the other side, you saw the police officers, and all they could do was just stand there because it's the, you know, privilege to say what they, you know, they can say that. So she then closes the door, runs into her room, and locks herself up. She peeks in the window, and she sees this going on everywhere. So that's when she ran into the closet, and she calls me hysterically. I did not know what to do. I felt this little, or this big, I should say, as a parent, because as much of encounters I've had, I've never had it that bad. My husband, who is 10 years older than I am, who is an African-American as well, he's never had it that bad. My daughter experienced what her paternal grandparents experienced. And I didn't know how to speak to that. I didn't know how to comfort her. So long, there was a lot to the story, but obviously we got in our car and we drove down to the school to get her, and we realized that it wasn't just an attack on my daughter. It was like the whole school was going haywire. So we just grabbed her and took her home. And then again, even then, her social media, all of her friends who were, her white friends, the stuff that she was reading right on social media, they felt the privilege to say the N-word, to say all this stuff, and she was confused. She's like, I just don't understand. I thought they liked me. Like, they don't like me, then why are they my friends with me? So it's so very confusing, the mixed messages. So I understood that on firsthand when Star turned to her friend and say, you don't even realize what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You're being a racist and you don't know it. So that, just something to share and just to keep in mind, that just something to be mindful of.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. I know that year was very hectic because I was on a college campus too and had many of those similar experiences. And then like when the police just stand there and do nothing, or when ICE comes and then you're like, why are you chasing me? I'm just a student here. Like, I live here, right? So it's just very interesting to see the impact of racism on relationships that we have with one another, that we have with our peers, and that we have with those around us. And I know we're starting to come to the end of our conversation. I really encourage you all to continue this with one another. And I'm going to pose one last question for our panelists and all of you, which is, how can we use our voices? How can we start to actually disrupt these behaviors or patterns? Because by the end of the movie, our main character Star here is like, nope, I will never be silent again. I'm going to use my voice. I'm going to lead the charge. Like, so what are maybe some of our ideas? So if any of our panelists would like to share kind of what are some of those ideas of how can we take action?
Sure, I can.
I see Joyce and Dick Armstrong, I think, had their hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, it's unmuted now. Maybe I can put it back down. We were at a dinner today at our daughter's house, and there was a person there who, I didn't know it, but was a strong Trump supporter. Evidently, we were talking some, and then we got into the whole area of racism, and he kind of said, oh, well, that's the way it is, and I'm racist, everybody's kind of racist in a way. And I stood up to him and said, that isn't okay. And he's actually the father of our granddaughter. And I felt very comfortable saying it's not all right. And Trump was the great divider. He's not bringing us together. He's not helping. He's been stoking racism, and it's not all right. It has to stop. Mm. So I felt good that I had my voice and I stood up for what I believe in.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, that's definitely one thing that we can do, is using our voice in situations like that as well. Absolutely.
I think one thing we can do, and I think it starts right now, is, start having these conversations, and, cheerlead to you, Joyce, when, there is a time where you feel like you have to speak up. I think Star found her voice during this tragic incident. And sadly, that has been kind of the way it has evolved in history. A lot of times, these tragic situations start a new movement and open the environment for dialogue. So another way that you can do it is, reach out outside your comfort zone or your normal circle. Maybe participate in a book reading session, or read a book by some author of color who talks about race, and maybe join a book discussion about that. There's a lot of books and films, and similar to The Hate U Give, you can get them on demand on Netflix. I mean, there's so much content out there that I don't be afraid to kind of start to educate yourself. So when you're in these situations where you have these uncomfortable conversations, you have a little ammo, and that gives you a little confidence to say, well, I read this book and maybe I can suggest a book, White Fragility, or, you know, did you hear or follow the author or the blogger or the person on Twitter, Abram X. Kendi, who talks a lot about race in these conversations. So I think a lot of it is just getting your confidence, reaching outside your comfort zone, and educating yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah. All right. See a couple hands up. So we'll go to Alex and then Suzanne. Go ahead.
So I brought over I'm a paraeducator. So I work at Windsor High School. I've been a substitute teacher for a while. And one of the ways that I think, like, I was thinking of using your voice and like how money is involved in that sometimes. And I've got, because a lot of students, like, we had reading hours, and a lot of like people of color tend to be underrepresented in history and in the sciences. This is one of the books that I got. It's called "What Color Is My World," and like it's a elementary school level book about Black inventors, and they're out there. So if you're getting books for like grandkids or for children, it's like, you know, you can like look, if you look far enough, there are books on like mixed race partnerships in inventing and just like people of color. So as much as like I was raised more or less like with white authors, male authors, if you diversify the reading list of the kids, a lot of this still remains about the inheritance, like what we have as adults, you know, give to the little ones.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, definitely through literature and media as well. Suzanne, would you like to share?
Sure. This is a small thing, but I just realized I don't have relationships with Black people of color in my life. And so I just decided this spring I would join the golf league at Keeney Park, because I knew it would be a mixed race. And it's just my way of trying to be in relationship. And I went there by myself, and, you know, and it was wonderful. At the end of the season, we had a tournament with the Latina group. It's not educational, but it's just because I can identify with what Carol says, because that discomfort in my comfort, and it's been there a long time. So it's a beginning. It's a small step, and these conversations are very helpful to me to just come to know what I need to know as a human.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. When this COVID is over, we'll hang out.
Yeah. So
I said, when this COVID is over, we'll hang out.
Absolutely. So there's our great examples here about how we can take action. I kind of like to see it as like a universe. There's so much that you can do. There's no right or wrong way to do it. You just kind of move fluidly throughout. You get to go and see if you want to do artivism, if you want to educate yourself, listening to audiobooks, or maybe getting to know one another better, having these conversations. Like the world is not only your oyster, but universe to kind of explore and unpack these with yourselves and those around you. So before I hand it over to Kevin to close us out, would any of our panelists or would anyone have anything that they would like to say for final thoughts?
I can start off. You know, again, I can't commend you enough, because I think giving your hour and a half, that this is a gift to us. So giving your time tonight to me speaks volumes. So you've already taken a huge step. So it's not little, Suzanne, nothing's little. Every step means a world. And so I really just want to thank you all for wanting to learn more. I do want to say, you know, obviously we can't cover everything in an hour and a half, but I can definitely, you know, I'm found in Windsor, and if any one of you want to have, you know, a more intimate, continue this conversation on a more intimate level, I know sometimes even on Zoom it's a little intimidating. Please reach out. You can reach me by email. I can share my phone number. So just reach out and I'll be happy. You know, we can spend some time on the phone or just a one-on-one Zoom. But I thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, same. I just wanted to reiterate what Maria said. I know we didn't get to cover all of the questions, or if there are more questions or dialogue that anyone wants to have one-on-one, I'd be happy to share, you know, my email, and we can, you know, set something up as well. So I am available.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, you know, echo Maria and Genevieve, and just, you know, give yourself credit for taking the step. I think, you know, having an open mind and an open heart and embracing these conversations is definitely a way for progress. We are more alike than not alike. And I think, you know, remembering that in this time where everybody is, it's an environment of divisiveness. It's nice to see all these faces who are looking for ways for us all to come together. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thank you all so much. And we will be sending out a couple of our slides, such as some of the resources that we have, like tips and different things like that. So if you want to continue to have this conversation and continue to learn for yourself and those around you, I highly encourage you to check that out. But Kevin, would you like to close us out here?
When I learn how to use the unmute button. Hello, everybody. I just want to thank my facilitator, Cassie Copeland, Camilla thank you so much. My panelists, Camilla Avant, Maria Rodriguez. I need my coquito. I need some better coquito. And also Genevieve Condon, thank you so much for being a part of this. Special guest, thank you for being here. It was a small, intimate group. If you have comments, suggestions, or want more information, you can email us at communitydevelopment@townofwindsorct.com. That's communitydevelopment@townofwindsorct.com. Our upcoming conversations will start in January. Here's something that I'd like your help on. If you like part 2 of this, because I know that we didn't touch everything that was on our schedule to have continue the conversation, we can make arrangements to continue this in December. If that is okay with my panelists, and we can get back with you as the date that we can all select and come back to the same topic, because there's a lot of stuff that we didn't get to touch on. And I think it warrants a December conversation. So how about we just go ahead and agree for, I see Camilla, her face is just like saying it all. But anyway, Genevieve and Maria.
That's a different conversation.
So Genevieve, hopefully we can all, the 4 of us or the 5 of us can get together and see a date that we can do in December. Yes, that's correct, Alex. That's the correct email address. Town of Windsor CTA, yes.
Marcia or Marcia, did you have, I'm sorry to cut you off, Judge, but I think I keep seeing her hand kind of, or am I hallucinating?
No, I just wanted, I've mentioned this to Judge Washington, but Grace Church is having an anti-racism program on Zoom on December 10th. And there is a flyer for it. Any of you would be more than welcome to come. Kevin Booker Jr. will be and one of the colleagues will be the presenters. So, and thank you for this program. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. And Marcia, would you also send me a copy of that flyer so I can ask Jim to put it on the Town of Windsor website? All right, so if we'll get back with you all because you all had to register, and we can send it to your email address when the date in December is selected. It will be probably after the December 10th event to give you all the opportunity to go there. But I would love to hear any special topics that you would like to talk about. One that I'm throwing around in
I'll be right there.
One I'm throwing around in January is what is Black Lives Matter all about? A lot of people don't know, what that's about. I also want to have a youth panel where the kids get to talk about this issue. We're going to address structural racism, that kind of thing, like housing, racism in housing, racism in medical, government. So there's a lot of topics that we need to cover. That's why this is not finite and will end December 31st, 2020. It will go on as long as it needs to. So I hope that you tell your friends when you get the alert as to when these conversations are happening, because the more you tell, the better people are informed. And I will leave you with that tonight. Again, thank you to my special guests. Thank you to my commissioners that are on, Lynn Swade and Joyce Armstrong, if you'll wave. Thank you. Those are two of my favorite commissioners. So thank you for being here, and all of you. And I wish you the happiest of holidays. Until we meet again, wear your mask, wash your hands, and stay safe. Thank you, ladies. And I really appreciate you, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanksgiving weekend was probably not a good time to do it. We don't know how small a group it was, but I think it was pretty small.
Cassie.
Yes.
I think this will come out on YouTube, won't it?
For this one, yeah, we can post the link up to it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Cassie,
Awesome.
can you turn the host back to me?
Yeah, sure thing.
It will be, make sure we'll get the recording of it.
Perfect. Yep. Sounds good.
All right.
I'm gonna make you host. Excellent. Yep.
Great. Good job.
All right. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Copeland, for having Cassie.
She was waiting to see if I would hit end meeting because, like, I always do that too quick sometimes.
And Marva, I have your mom in my prayers. So, all right. Bye-bye.